Buck-a-muck, go wild. Hello everyone. Today we are going to look at my old horse, Amazement. This is actually a Breyer horse. He's from the Breyer Ponies line. I've had him for pretty much as long as I can remember. But lately, just today in fact, I got an original look-alike. So this guy is what he used to look like back when he was new. As you can see, Amazement had long hair and very crisp paint, nice vivid colors, whereas my current horse, well, he needs a little bit of work. He used to have the same long mane, but when I was a kid especially, I had no tolerance for anything I deemed unrealistic, and this sort of mane is definitely unrealistic. So I gave Amazement a new, shorter, more realistic mane and tail. So that's how he looks the way he does now. But I would really like to repaint him in a way that he looks the way he used to, at least to some extent, and bring some life back into this old model. Now the goal with this is to make him look as close to original as possible. So what I did to start is I took the paints that I happened to have, and right here on his leg I did some test swatches. Maybe you can see on the camera there that there's a little bit of blobbiness right here on his leg, just to see how close my unmixed paints were. And then from there I mixed up paints as best as I could to try to match his color. And this is what I came up with. This paint here, Chocolate Bar, was close, but too pinkish, purpley-ish kind of color. This Folk Art Coffee Bean was close, but it was just too light. So, what I'm going to do, the mixture that worked best, was starting with the coffee bean, darkening it up a little bit with some black, and then adding some chocolate bar just to kind of get that chocolatey dark color without so much that it turns pink. Okay, so this is the color I have so far. What I'm going to do is take just a little bit of it, take my horse, and paint just a little tiny bit to see how it compares. Now it's important to let the paint dry completely when you're doing this, and also you want to look at it under good lighting, because we're trying to get it as close to original as possible. It doesn't look bad. Alright, so obviously once you're happy with your paint color, and I very much am, I can't imagine this looking any better than it does. It's amazing. But anyway, amazing on Amazement. Yes, it's fitting. Anyway, once you have the paint color to where you like it, for a horse like this, this is the easy fun part. He does not have any shading. He doesn't have any complicated markings on him. Not really, anyway. So I'm just going to take my paint here and start painting him. You're just being careful and staying along the lines and trying to not use too thick a layer. Don't leave any bubbles or brush strokes or anything like that. And he should look pretty snazzy. Amazement with a fresh coat of paint. Because we want to be really careful going along the edges. Of course, if I do accidentally go over the line and into the white, when I touch up his white areas, I can simply smooth it back out. When I was a kid, he was actually bad enough that kid me attempted to paint him. He had a lot of, or still does have, a lot of yellowing and black marks on his white spots. And you can see, like right there, there's some old white acrylic paint on him. Of course, I didn't do that great a job. But now I can make it up to you, Amazement. It's not going to be perfect, but whatever imperfections will be there will hopefully be small enough that they won't be noticeable. If you take a large amount of paint and just slap it on there real quick, then you will see brush strokes and it will be lumpy and uneven. So by taking small amounts, you will make a smoother, cleaner finish. Now you see, even on this factory done paint here, it's a little fuzzy around the edges. So it really doesn't have to be perfect. Even the factory has oversprays and mess ups. But you do want to get it as clean and nice looking as possible. Going over this big part on the front, here's where I was painting on him earlier. You have to be very careful as you move around, especially if you're impatient like I am and you don't wait for the paint to dry. And make sure that you're not holding on to any of these spots that you've already painted. Even if you don't lose paint, you will leave fingernail or fingerprints and smudges and all sorts of things behind. Obviously, when going around his mane, you want to be careful. You don't want acrylic paint in his mane. Now, depending on your horse, if you have that big old fluffy thing of mane sticking out the side of your horse's head, you might need to tie it back or use wax paper and wrap it up a little bit. This guy has an eyebrow, and he also has a little bit of lining around his eye. I do have the newer horse, or the less torn up horse, as a sort of a reference, but if you're repainting a horse and you don't have a reference as to what he used to look like, you might want to take pictures, or maybe have some reference photos on your computer from the internet, or that sort of thing, so that you don't accidentally forget about something like an eyebrow on your horse. I personally am not going to paint over this eyebrow because I think this part of his face looks alright enough as it is. I am, however, going to go over his ears. Again, ears might be something that's could be messed up if you forget, for example, what the interior of his ears are painted. Alright, here he is after just one coat of brown, and I have to say, in my opinion at least, he already looks so much better. Just one coat of brown paint has taken away so many scuffs and scrapes. And, I mean, even his ear tips are looking better, and this is just such a huge improvement. Now, I will probably go ahead and touch up a second coat of paint. Now, normally when I do horses, I like to use an off-white. But for this guy, comparing to this horse here, he uses a very, very bright white. Sort of a fantasy horse, so, I mean, for this, I guess he can get away with white. Like, it is ridiculous. The difference in color here, this bright white versus this yellowed old plastic color. This is going to need more than one coat, I can already tell you. Okay, here we are after one coat of white. I decided to do this by halves, so I've only gotten this half of him done. I've not yet done this half, but I'm doing it this way to kind of keep the hair brushed away from the paint, and so that I've got two legs to hold on to while I'm painting this part. Okay, so my prediction of 3 coats was slightly optimistic. I'm honestly not sure how many this is, I lost count, but it's at least 6 coats of paints on this horse. Part of the problem, I think, might be that the white parts were never primed. So this is the unpainted side. I think that this was always just bare plastic. And I say that partly because this particular white spot acts and feels different from the rest of it. It's easier to paint, and the paint sticks there much longer, much like the brown paint that I did. The brown paint only took 2 coats, as you remember, and then when I saw him next to the original horse, I realized that his coat was a little bit darker than the original paint. So I mixed a little bit more of this chocolate bar into my paint and redid him, so he now has 3 coats of this brown, just to kind of brighten up his paint a little bit. So anyway, I have all of his brown painted and half of the white. You can see here on his chest, this part is still unpainted and this part is, so it's quite a stark difference. And because I did not prime this horse, a lot of the paint is just kind of soaking into the plastic, which I think is why, again, I'm having a bit of trouble getting him painted. But that's okay. I'm halfway there, if you don't count his hooves and face. So next I need to do this side. And it will probably take me another 2 days to finish it. So just a few more thoughts on painting, and my personal technique is I keep my special mix paints in here to keep it moist in case I need to touch up the brown as I go. And then when I'm using this solid paint that I don't need to mix, I just take whatever piece of plastic I have and use that as sort of a painter's palette. Also, I do have off screen here some water, and I am using it. I dip my paintbrush into it as I am painting, and just to kind of keep that paint a little bit thinner and help it kind of go on smoothly. Finally, as I am starting to work on this side of the horse, I need to be very mindful and careful of the side that I have already painted, because I do not want the paint to drip and mess up what I've already done, either on the stomach or the back or anywhere really. And also, as I am holding these back legs, I need to be very careful to not smudge it with paint. If I have some paint on my fingers, I need to not get it on the leg, and I need to not death grip it either, because that will rub the paint and damage it. And I want to keep this paint nice and good, solid, since I spent so much time on it. So just some things to remember as you're painting. Okay, so I am finally, after I don't even know how many coats, happy with his white paint. I've even done his face. And now all that's left for me to do is to touch up the borders of the brown here, and like up here where I've messed up the paint a little bit. What you don't want is a really thick, obvious line of paint right at the edge of your markings. So I've got this flat brush here. It's got a little bit of water on it, but not soaking wet. And I'm just going to take this wet edge of the paint and kind of pull it down into the color. And that'll keep it from having this real obvious thick outline of paint. So here he is, outlined. I'm pretty happy with his coat color now. I did the eyes off camera because in order to paint in front of the camera, I kind of have to have them out at arm's length. And I wanted to be able to see and be really careful with the eyes. But basically he had little rubs on each of his eyes. And this one basically just needed a little black dot, boop, right in his pupil. And this one actually needed a little bit of orange, which I didn't do too great a job doing, but I kind of sort of reconstructed his eye. Also, here on the left corner, he didn't have this white on the edge of his eye. It was solid black. So I went ahead and added that as well, because this eye does have that. So that's that. Now, of course, when you're restoring or customizing a horse, you are welcome to make any different changes that you might want to do. For example, in this original horse, I never liked this bright orange outline in his nose and his mouth. It just sort of always bothered me. So for my horse, I think I'm just going to outline it in a really soft pink on his lip and maybe a darker or softer gray in his nose. And it will be a very small difference from the factory painted model, but just like his unique haircut, it'll just be something to make him my own and have my little mark left on him. Now, of course, with this bright orange color and this light gray, it will need more than one coat. But this is to see how I like the effect. See, I've already got some on the edge of his nose too far. Now that, to me, just looks better than that orangey. I'm just going to very carefully go around the edges here of his mouth. Alright. I left his teeth the original plastic color, just because I liked that slightly yellowed look for his teeth. I've already smeared some paint on it, but that's okay. I can take a clean paintbrush and kind of scoop that out. So when I think that I'm done, or at least close to it, I like to take my horse out into the natural sunlight and give it a really good look over and see if there's any spots or scuffs or smears that I didn't quite see under my lamplight. But just to give the horse a good look over and see that this is what it's going to look like forever and ever, and make sure that I'm happy with that. And I think he looks pretty good. This guy is actually the first haired horse that I have painted. Normally, for a horse like this, which I painted from a Breyer Misty horse, I would use a spray-on sealant like this. And that's what I'm used to using. That's what I've always used. But you can't really spray this horse. I guess you could try to wrap up his mane and tail, but even then I wouldn't quite trust it to not get his hair totally gross. So I went and got a variety of brush-on sealants. This guy originally has a very glossy look. Not glossy, but shiny. So I'm going to use the satin varnish for his body and the gloss varnish for his eyes and hooves. You see these hooves are super shiny. As I am working on this horse, I just thought I'd like to mention that normally I would put a lot more details on the horse, especially on the face. As you know, I did change the facial markings, the nose and the mouth on this horse, but normally I would have given this horse some pinking or something on his nose to try to liven up his rather dull looking face, but because I am trying to preserve the original look as much as I can, I decided to keep him plain without any shading or markings or what have you. See, like this horse I pulled out earlier does have a pink nose and various gradients on his face, her face. And that's the sort of thing that I would normally do. But this is more of a restoration than a customization. I just learned this the hard way. You want to make super duper sure both your brush and your water are super duper clean with absolutely no paint residue. Because as I was painting on this sealant, I was thinking, gosh, where are all these streaky marks coming from? My paint was dry. It's coming from my brush. Whoops. Well, you learn something new every day. And here is Amazement, the finished horse. He is totally painted and sealed and ready to go. I am super happy with how he turned out. Just as a side note here, satin varnish, this particular product, is actually very glossy. He came out a little shinier than I expected, but I think he looks awesome. So here is his factory finish horse, and to be honest, I think that this guy looks a little better, if only because the factory horse has a secret, and that's he wore this saddle with his felt English saddle pad for too long, and he now has staining, some red staining on his sides here. There, I don't know if you can see it, but there it is. And also from wearing his saddle for so long, he's got some melty spots here on his belly where the girth kind of damaged his plastic a little bit. And he's got the normal scuffs from being 20 years old. So, between the two of them, I think I like my newly painted model better. And there they are. Are you gonna stop barking anytime soon? I've got something to do here. So maybe you could stop barking? No? Chickadee? Maybe? Chickadee. Chickadee. It's Chickadee. She's barking. Yes, she is. The chickadee goes woof 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 woof. Yes, she does. She goes woof 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 woof. It's thunder, my dear. It's thunder. I know. I know. I ended up taking 32 clips, not counting the pictures, of this restoration. And when editing it, I chopped it into really small pieces to try to cut it down as much as I could. And it's still super, super long. Seriously, why do I talk so much on camera? I don't talk at all to real people, but when I am alone and with the camera, suddenly I can't shut my mouth. Like right now.